Well, some Texas lawmakers are calling for stricter gun laws following the tragic shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. And one of those lawmakers on the front line of the effort is Houston Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a senior member of the House Homeland Security and Judiciary Committees. Jackson Lee has been an advocate for more gun safety laws in America for a long time. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so very much for giving me the opportunity. Hello to your listeners on this day of reflection.
It is a day of reflection, isn't it, ma'am? And first, tell our listeners about H.R. 227, the Child Gun Safety and Gun Access Prevention Act.
Well, it's legislation that I introduced now for 10 sessions to focus on protecting children directly, dealing with a number of provisions dealing with gun safety, gun locks, or securing the guns, a bill that could have been passed maybe 10 years ago, even though the perpetrator for this terrible act was older than a young child. Still, it puts the focus on gun safety and the idea of making sure that our guns are secure. We now have, of course, a new day, and I hope to merge my legislation into the legislation that is being drafted now by Senator Feinstein. And before I discuss that, let me, of course, indicate to your listeners that we mourn, but we should also, as far away as we are in Texas, offer our deepest sympathy to the families of the children and teachers that died in a horrific display of gun violence and warfare-type actions. Certainly with an AK-47, you would almost imagine that you're in the midst of a war. But I think now is the time, such a sense of urgency, that we really want to call on people from all different perspectives, regardless of their party affiliation, to take an account and be held accountable for first to the tragedy with Congresswoman Gifford, then we moved to Aurora and Wisconsin, to Oregon, to the intense loss of life in Chicago in an urban center, and now we come full circle to a very quiet town in Connecticut. I really think there is a moment in history that calls upon not just Democrats and Republicans, but really that calls upon Americans to act. Senator Feinstein, I had a chance to speak with her today, and is working to finalize the ban on assault weapons with a number of other provisions in it. I'm hoping to be able to work with her on the House side with my colleagues. And really the call now is for listeners to reach out to their congressional representatives, even those in Texas, to be able to speak a one voice and to demand an urgent action, not a reaction, to passing gun safety legislation, which includes the ban on assault weapons, and it is futuristic, it is not retroactive, and it is not an undermining of the Second Amendment because it does not reach into people's homes to take guns out of their homes.
Right. Well, Congresswoman Lee, here in Texas, another controversial move that gathers steam after an incident like this, of course, is the issue of whether Texas teachers should be armed. Could you please tell our listeners where you stand on this issue?
Well, you always want to be thoughtful when you get asked a question like that. But what is a school? It is a place of learning, a place of happiness. One of the things that Sandy Hook, as all the stories have unfolded, prided themselves in, is a safe refuge for our children. And, of course, our teachers. We owe them a responsibility to secure them. I am looking thoughtfully at ways of doing so. For example, we've just passed a major bond initiative. We should be looking at bulletproof glass for schools. We should be looking at a system of a steel door that when there is an alarm that there is a possible intrusion, those doors come down. We're sophisticated enough to build schools with that kind of technology. And this would have been an excellent response to Mr. Lanzer, because what he did is he shot his way into the school with the automatic weapon. He literally shot down the door, and he came blasting into the school. if it was a automatic wall that came down as they noted that this individual was attempted to do harm, that can be a source of protection. I cannot, at this juncture, believe that arming teachers, or that teachers would want to be armed, is going to be the answer for a place that is a refuge for learning, for creativity, for solace, for happiness, and for our children.
For those of you who may just be joining us, we are speaking with Houston Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, the senior member of the House Homeland Security and Judiciary Committees, and we are very privileged to have her with us right now. Please, Congresswoman, could you expand on the provision for the need for families to be able to acknowledge mental health issues within their family and seek counseling services?
I absolutely want to do so. And, sometimes when we have these discussions while we're discussing the issue of ending gun violence, or at least finding ways to stop the tide of the massive number of killings, I just want to as I give you my response to that, indicate that 3,000 adults a month in America are killed by guns. 3,000 children a year are killed by guns. And we have lost over 1 million people since the 1970s with as a result of gun violence. But the other aspect of tragedy, and we hear it often, we heard it with the individual accused in the shooting of Congresswoman Giffords and the many others who either died or were injured during that incident. We heard it with the gentleman, the incident with Aurora, Colorado in the movie theater. And so what I'm concerned about is, are we helping families address head-on by our structured mental health support system to get immediate assistance? I am told by my constituents, and I know it is well-meaning, there's a lot of paperwork. When you finish the paperwork, it may be that they have no bed. What my point says is that I would like to be able to get families immediate assistance either through public-funded or private counseling services. Seek public-funded or private counseling services immediately, but to make that accessible. There is certainly, every time an incident occurs, you heard a description of the perpetrator of this incident on Friday. There's talk of autism, and there's talk of other aspects of autism, and I would hesitate to attribute this to any particular form of mental illness or even attribute it to autism. I think we have to be hesitant to jump to any conclusions, but certainly it is noted that this individual had some mental health issues. His family needed to have enough comfort and enough recognition of their responsibility to get this person possibly hospitalized, possibly in a residential situation, but he needed to be somewhere other than on his own accord. He was left to his own devices. He picked up guns out of his home and went to a sleepy, if you will, a sleepy town as it's been described, but a town that was known as an idyllic northeastern or New England town where children were happily learning and preparing for Christmas and other holidays, and killed 20 children and 6 adults. That individual needed immediate mental health attention way before the incident occurred. His family seemingly either was not able to or did not secure it. That, too, has to be a reformation in our society. We have to change, and we have to be able to look at these issues, and we have to feel comfortable that the society will embrace us in the fact that we're acting to provide care for our loved ones.
And finally, Congresswoman, as he addressed the nation, President Barack Obama has vowed to do whatever it takes to stop gun violence, but hasn't actually offered any specifics. Do you believe that H.R. 227, the Child Gun Safety and Gun Access Prevention Act, is a good step?
First of all, I was inspired by the president's remarks. I know that all of the gun violence through the tenure of his election and even before he comes from Chicago has obviously bothered him as a parent and as an American, as simply as a human being. I think yesterday and the days before, we saw a resolve that was of great inspiration, and it showed that he obviously understood the urgency of now, that it is now time to move on acting to pass legislation. I am supporting the assault ban that is being proposed and written by Senator Feinstein, and I believe H.R. 227 can be an excellent complement to that as well. So, yes, I believe it is time to look at reasonable gun safety. And I've never used the word control. We can't control Americans because the Constitution protects their rights of movement in the Second Amendment. But we can regulate. And therefore, I want Texans to view this in a way where Texans can stand united, because we're known, many people, for their appreciation for guns. But this is a time for a state as diverse as we are, with such a young population, trying to encourage our young people to be responsible, to support this kind of legislation. And it truly is a time when we should not be tied to any group or any philosophy, but really to what is right. What is right is that the utilization of war weapons, automatic weapons, multiple rounds, multiple ammunition is certainly not an appropriate use of weapons that are used in war. We can be safe. We can protect our teachers and our students. We can reinforce our schools. We can find many solutions short of arming every person, even in our places of worship, in hospitals, in schools. I think America is better than that. We can do better than that. We do not have to arm doctors, nurses, teachers, and individuals who are there for another purpose in order for them to be safe.
Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. And I might say this, if there are vigils tonight, let my office know, but I would encourage people to embrace their neighbors. Maybe even this evening. We're looking to do so in the next couple of days to bring people together. But this is an appropriate evening. I'm sure the weather is good in Texas. It always is, if I might say. And just find a way to share both in the grief of those in Connecticut. I think this is the first time that we've had children of this age group pointedly murdered and shot down like a war, blasting them with 3 and 11 bullets. So I would just encourage all of those within the sound of my voice, all of the KPFT listeners, to find your neighbors and embrace them. Come out of your homes tonight, maybe gather in your neighborhoods, maybe 2 or 3, 4 or 5, and just show some sign of recognizing what a devastating incident and event that was, and to show connection to those who have lost lives and those parents and family members who are suffering.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time today. We've been speaking with Houston Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a senior member of the House Homeland Security and Judiciary Committees, and we appreciate all of the time that she was able to give us this afternoon.